Welcome back to the House of Pain. I'm only joking. It feels like every time I see you guys there's less of a bike, and obviously the title of the video is that it should be a bike build, and I promise that this is going to be the last episode of me taking loads of shit off the bike, and the next one we're actually going to start rebuilding. So let's start at the front and work our way back. So most of the action has happened up here since the last time I saw you. So whilst I was refitting the sump frame, I noticed how much paint damage had been caused by the leaky cylinder on the top yoke. So I thought to myself, well, I'll take the top yoke off, repaint all of that, look at the bars, replace some of the nuts and bolts there. While I was doing that, I realised that the fork bottoms were quite tragically damaged as well, and I thought, well, you know, seeing as I've reconditioned the brake calipers, maybe I'll do the forks as well. So I took the forks out. Whilst I had the forks out, I thought, well, the caps look pretty nasty, so let's take those off and change the oil in the forks, because that's probably never been done, so I'm going to show you that. Someone commented in the last video that the exhaust was really rusty, and after that comment I really started to notice it, so I thought, well, I'll take the exhaust off and I'll recondition that. So I've taken the exhaust off. Obviously I had to drain all the water system out, so I'll show you how to do that and to remove the radiator. I've checked the power valve assembly and operation to make sure that that was okay, so I'll show you how to do that. Yeah, that's basically the front end so far. Engine and all that remains untouched since last time. What I have done is I've taken out all of the old oil, checked the oil filters, which were quite nasty. I've cleaned it all out and I've done an oil change. Haven't yet filled it back up because I don't want oil sitting in here gunking the system up unless I'm going to be running it. So I'll show you how to take that off. I'll show you how to replace all of the oil filters. I took the fuel assembly out of the tank and noticed that there was a broken fuel line in there, so I've had to replace that and the fuel tap and everything like that, so I'll show you how to do that. Frame's had a good polish, not quite finished yet, but it's getting there. Front and rear wheels are out. That's because I'm looking at tyre selections and possibly getting the wheels powder coated. So loads and loads of stuff going on, and I'm going to try and talk you through some of that stuff right now. Right, okay, so we're going to start with the oil tank removal, and of course that means draining the oil out of it as well, and we're going to need to disconnect this oil assembly and the filters as well. So there's 3 bolts in the under tray that you're going to need to undo by hand. Really straightforward. You can do it with a ratchet, or as you can see here, with a handheld tool. Now all you need to do is apply a little bit of pressure on the tank and just drop it out of the bottom. You've got to be really careful not to disconnect anything here, otherwise you'll have oil pissing out. You're also going to need to remove the oil sender or sensor, give that a clean up and just put that to one side. You can disconnect it from the electrics if you need to. So at this point you'll be able to slide the tank down and rotate it down. Just pop the cap off and just make sure that you're ready, because the oil absolutely pisses out everywhere. So you're just going to need to drain this completely out. I'm going to throw this oil away because I've got new oil to put in, and you'll see why in just a second. So just give it a minute to drain out fully before you take it away and do any cleaning. Next up, you're going to need to remove the filter assembly. It's supposed to have some clips on it. Mine was just held together with cable ties. Of course, you know, why not? And we'll replace these with proper clips when we put it back on in just a second. So now we've got this removed, we can take it outside and give it a clean up. These are click R-type hose clips on here. You can get a screwdriver underneath and just pop them off. The ones I've got to replace them with are slightly different. After that, you should just be able to slide the oil filter assembly off. These are reusable, you can replace the filters in them, but I decided to go for a complete new assembly. And here you go, here you can see, this is the filter. It's absolutely covered with shit, and I don't know why. Perhaps it's because it's been run on low grade oil, but it definitely needs replacing. So I've got myself a completely new filter assembly. First thing that goes back in is the actual filter itself. Nice and straightforward, just slip it in. Next up, put the hose clip over the top and slide this back on. You can use a bit of lubricant to get that back on, but it should just slide back on by hand. and you can see it's got one of the click type connectors on it, which you'll need a pair of pliers to reattach. Next up, the connector. It should have its own click type hose connector, and there should be another one on the hose when you attach it back to the bike. And assembly is obviously the exact reverse, and here you can see the 3 clips that it should have had, not cable ties. Okay, so I'm going to remove the radiator, not just because I've run out of things to do, but because I want to get to the exhaust and remove that and clean it and have a good old look at it. So I need to remove the radiator so I don't take this skin off my knuckles trying to get at the exhaust. So it's just one bolt up here holding it on. There's 2 grommets underneath here where it's just sitting in as a cradle. The drain plug's just over the right hand side here, so drain all of your fluid out and keep that if you can. Then you'll just need to disconnect the 2 hose pipes. One's down here, one on the other side at the top, and then you're ready to rock. Right, so now the radiator's gone, you can see the 2 spring clips that we're going to remove using a spring puller. Obviously, if you've got one of those, they're ideal. If you haven't, you can use a pair of pliers, but be prepared to lose part of your knuckle. Then there's 2 Allen key bolts there that look like they're in okay condition. Let's see. So the exhaust is also sat on a rubber mount just under here. Allen key bolt will be countered, 13mm nile up in the back. Once you've undone that, it should just be able to slide the whole exhaust assembly down. Okay, so I'm quite happy with the actual end can, but the actual exhaust is minging, so I'm going to see if I can bring that back. If I can't, might have to paint it. Maybe I'll paint it anyway. I don't know, we'll see. Okay, so I've taken back a lot of the surface rust, but there's no saving that. I'm not going to be able to polish that back up, so I think it's going to have to be painted, which is a real shame. Right, so I figured while the exhaust was off, I'd check the power valve operation, or RAVE valve as it's known as in the workshop manual. It's 2 bolts, simply remove those and you can pull it out. It's always good to check because this does get clogged up with oil and dirt and shit. As you can see, some of it's already on there, but what you're looking for is to make sure that you get a smooth operation, that the springs working. You can even check the solenoid manually by pushing it with your finger. You can just see it at the top here. Now if I push this in, it should operate the valve nicely and smoothly. It shouldn't get stuck, it shouldn't get lodged in or out or anything like that. So yeah, quite happy with the operation of this. As you can see, there's another way of checking it. You can just pull on the cable. You do need to keep careful watch on the cable adjustment, which you can do manually as well. So when you're reinstalling it, you've just got to make sure that the cable section, as you can see here, and the chamfered edge on the edge of the valve is facing downwards. You can just reinsert back into the bike, into the right hole, and put the 2 bolts back in again, making sure the gasket seals nicely. Right, so time to get the front wheel off, and obviously I want to take the forks out, so I've supported the whole front end of the bike with a couple of ratchet straps from the ceiling. Obviously you're better off doing this with a headstand stand if you can. It's a 27mm nut on the front axle. You'll also need to undo the pinch clips on the bottom of both the fork legs. You don't need to take these out entirely, they're just there to keep the axle in. There should be a tool to take the front axle out, which of course I haven't got, so I'm just using an Allen key, and you should just be able to gently twist the front axle out with the pinch clips still in the forks, and then obviously you can remove the front wheel assembly. Next up, it's the top and bottom yokes. There's pinch bolts, 2 of on the lowers, so you can see me undoing those here. There's a handy tip using the spanner there if you can't get enough grip on it, and the same on the top. They're all Loctited up and basically fused together, so they were quite difficult to get undone. But these are obviously pinching the yokes onto the forks, so once they're loosened off, you should just be able to gently twist the forks and drop them out the bottom. So here you have it. These are my forks. I'm going to repaint the lowers. Obviously they need a bit of work, and there's a bolt that needs drilling out of this particular one. I'm going to give these a coat over in satin black. So first of all, I'm going to need to take back all of the dirt, aggravate the surface. You don't need to take it right back, but just give the paint something to fuse to. So just rough the surface up with a coarse brush or some sandpaper. So it should have been a 30, but just about every Aprilia I've ever seen, the nut was completely rounded off. So I've smashed a 29 on there, which has obviously completely destroyed the nut, but at least I've managed to get it undone with the aid of this massive bar. Luckily I've ordered another one from PJM. So there we have one completely annihilated nut. Like I said, I've got a new one, so that's fine. Okay, so having seen how dirty the oil filter was on this bike, I thought it's probably worth checking the fuel filter inside the tank. So might seem like a fairly obvious thing, but drain your tank first and clearly don't smoke whilst doing this job. So what was I saying about every time you do a job you find another job? So this filter is okay, that's fine. Lift this one up and there, look, great big split in the fuel line. So obviously down here is the reserve. Once this is down, that split is underneath here, so fragments of that fuel line break off. It's going to travel down and into the fuel system, which is not good. But besides the point, it renders the fuel tap effectively worthless in a way, because the fuel just escapes into here irrespective. So it's no wonder my fuel tap didn't seem to work, as it were. So it's another job to do. What a pain in the arse. Well, that's it for me for this episode. My new fuel assembly's just arrived, so I'm going to go and fit that. This is going to be the last episode of me taking loads of stuff off the bike, and the next one's going to be the exciting one. It's about putting all the stuff back on, all the stuff I've repainted that you haven't seen yet, all the new parts that people have been sending me. I've got a massive pile of stuff to put on. So stay tuned for the next episode. If you like it, feel free to comment. If you've seen anything that I've missed, feel free to comment. It's been good, you know, having you guys on the journey with me. So stay tuned. The next episode is going to be really cool, and then the final assembly, MOT, and the first ride. I cannot wait. You're only a couple of weeks away, so stick with me, and we'll speak soon. Take care.